What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Bootleg Football Podcast. I'm your host, Brett Coleman, here with my wonderful co-host, EJ Snyder. And I promise I'll be better. I know I lost all the files for last week's episode. I'm an idiot. I fully apologize. I really tried to get it out. I actually had the whole thing edited. I was moving stuff between hard drives before I was just about to click upload. And messed it up just a little bit. So again, apologies to everybody out there. Apologies to our patrons who, give up your hard-earned money every single month to support us. That was my bad, as the kids like to say. But to make up for it, we have a truly excellent show for you today. We had a wild Week 17 in the NFL. The playoff picture has now narrowed to the tip of the spear. We only have a few teams that are still left in contention. But, with the NFL being as good at scheduling as they are, they're all playing each other this week, or at least they all have games that impact each other this week. So Week 18 should be just as crazy. Can't wait to see what happens. But before we get into recapping Week 17, EJ, buddy, how you doing? And what are you drinking tonight?
I'm good. We're back. We've got great football on tap for the last week of the season, the longest ever NFL season, which is not always the case. Last week, a lot of times, has a bunch of dog games, bunch of teams cutting out, resting their starters. No, we've got games that absolutely are going to determine playoff spots, like games plural. So, going to be fun to talk about that. Lots of storylines to get through from the last week. We're not going to go back 2 weeks. Sorry about that. That one's lost forever. But plenty to talk about from last Sunday and looking forward really to next Sunday. What am I drinking? I made it to the store in my area that carries one of my favorite Polish beers, OK Beer, Okotim. Good stuff. Good Polish lager, 5.6 by volume. Started in 1845 trivia. So that's a 16-ounce can. That'll get me through most of what we have to talk about. I hear you pouring something delicious. I'm just assuming it's delicious. What is it?
Well, it's winter. You know me. That means it's Isla season.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I've got my Pride and Joy, my Lagavulin 16. She never lets me down. Anytime I need something to warm me up on these cold Southern California winter nights. I always go with my Lagavulin 16, which, by the way, New Orleans weather, which is where I just was last week. That's why we couldn't just re-record the episode and get it out, because right when I realized that I deleted everything, it was like 12:30 in the morning, and I had to get to LAX 3 hours later to fly out to New Orleans for my wife's birthday. So they had a little bit of a cold snap come through while we were there. When we first got there, it was 80 degrees, 85% humidity, for some godforsaken reason, in the middle of December. And then by the time we left, it was 35 degrees.
Ooh.
And there was a 40-degree temperature change between Saturday and Sunday. And we didn't pack shorts for me. So I was walking around New Orleans going to our Gator tour in jeans and a freaking turtleneck. If you could imagine a
video, or it didn't happen. That I want to see, but it reminds me a little bit of actually when we met the year we were at Senior Bowl 2020, and it's only a month later, and it's a very similar part of the country. And one of those practices was one of the coldest football practices I've ever sat through.
Oh, it was frigid and windy.
Yeah, we ended up going out to dinner with Danny Kelly that night at the Mexican place, and we spent literally the first hour kind of huddled around some warm appetizers trying to thaw our fingers out. Yeah, it was freezing, so it can get pretty cold down there in the Southeast during wintertime, but the 85% humidity thing, whew.
Oh, it was brutal. It was brutal. We packed no warm weather clothes at all because we're like, it's December, it's New Year's, there's no way it's going to be warm. And then it was July weather. And even the people there were like, oh, this never happens. And I'm like, I came to town. Of course it would happen. You're not familiar with the Coleman curse. I bring hell with me everywhere I go. But it was actually a much crazier weekend than we anticipated because it was Sugar Bowl weekend. So there was Baylor and Ole Miss people everywhere. There was a Saints home game. It was New Year's. If I did all that math ahead of time, I probably would have been like, you know what, maybe let's not go to New Orleans when there's a million people everywhere. But hey, whatever. Food was really damn good. So in that sense, it was worth it. I had pig cooked like 8 different ways and shrimp cooked about 20 different ways. So in that vein, New Orleans, totally worth it.
Yeah, one of the best food cities in the country, if not the world. Just a fantastic city for any kind of cuisine you want. But yeah, tons of spots. I know you hit some of them because I got those very mouth-watering DMs at all hours. I had the best thing I've ever eaten. Look at this. And I'm like, oh, man, I had a ham sandwich. That's awesome.
Well, with that being said, why don't we get to news and notes for the week? Because a lot happened in my absence, and I had to spend all of Monday watching games back that I missed this weekend and trying to see what happened and catching up. Unfortunately, note number 1 is negative, and that is Michael Gallup tore his ACL this week. He is out for the year. He joins Chris Godwin as probably the 2 top-tier free agent receivers, not named Devontae Adams, that were expected to be on the market this offseason. Both of them are now out for the year with torn ACLs. Note number 2, I don't know if you saw it immediately, but that collapse of the railing at FedEx Field this week. By the way, did you see how they repaired that?
Yeah, it was zip ties. Thought it was
zip ties.
Hey, zip ties are strong, but I like Mina Kimes' suggestion because the Washington football team announced that they're going to announce their new name, and she was like, "How about the Washington Fix Your Damn Stadiums?" Can't disagree.
Yeah, that seems a little expensive for Dan Snyder.
Yeah, after you almost took out a quarterback of your division rival with a railing and 4 fans, not a good situation. So.
Well, Jalen Hurts is pissed because a story came out. I think it was today that it came out, that nobody from the stadium or the organization like checked on these people after they fell, looked for injuries, offered assistance, anything like that. And falling 6 feet on concrete, A, hurts a lot, and B, can cause some pretty significant damage, and nobody checked on them.
Instead,
and in fact, they immediately.
Did you hear what they said to him?
Oh no, I never saw there was an actual response.
Yeah, no, not response to the letter. One of the people that fell on the field and was quoted in that story when they said, "Hey, did anybody come up? Did anybody from the team come up? Did anybody from emergency services come up and say, hey, are you all right?" And everybody that was quoted in that story said, no, they didn't. They said, "Get the hell off the field."
Well, did you see the photographer kicked the person too?
Oh, I missed that. That part I didn't get, but I'm like, this is such a
There was
Washington
a league photographer,
yeah.
And the gate came down sort of on top of him, and people, there's a pile of bodies there, and he fucking kicks one of them. We're like, what the fuck?
This is just such a cluster of a story. It shouldn't have been a story in the first place. The railing shouldn't have collapsed. Many people have since come out saying other things about the Washington Stadium. The opposing radio crew didn't make the trip. The Eagles radio crew didn't make the trip because their lead broadcaster said, "I consider that place a dump," quote unquote. So they didn't even go to town. They did the radio broadcast remote, which is not at all typical. Yes, which is not at all typical for those of you not familiar with NFL media. The opposing, broadcast teams always come to the stadium. They always broadcast from the stadium. That's a thing. They're in the press box. And the Eagles radio coverage, not their local TV, but their radio coverage, didn't make the trip. They did it remote because, quote unquote, their lead broadcaster said, "I consider that place a dump."
He's not wrong.
Yeah, it's just a rough story, and it's just so Washington in all the right/wrong ways. It fits, and that's terrible.
Well, good on Jalen Hurts, though, for writing that letter to the Washington football team and to the NFL, because he saw that story and was like, hey, there needs to be follow-up here. These people could have been seriously hurt, and he could have been seriously hurt, too. Can you imagine if the railing fell directly on him?
the first thing I thought was, did that hit his foot or his ankle? Because he kind of hops out of the way, but you couldn't quite tell. It's obviously a chaotic scene. Like, did that railing fall 6 feet with 4 people on it and land like on his? Can you imagine if it broke his foot? Like, literally, the Washington Stadium takes out a quarterback in their, a rival quarterback in their division, in a team that's, you know, in the playoff hunt. Like, they're incredibly lucky. I'm really glad that no one was seriously injured. I'm not saying those people weren't injured. I have a feeling that'll come out later, but I'm glad that, like, nobody was, you know, bleeding, cracked their skull open, that Jalen didn't get the railing dropped on him. We've seen this guy up close. We got to see him at the opening press conference of the Senior Bowl. Really quiet guy, really thoughtful guy. Everybody that's ever played with him says great leadership. So the letter didn't surprise me at all. In fact, it seemed really in character for Jalen Hurts to say, yo, I was pretty shocked. I just tried to help these people, which he did. He sort of was like, are you okay? As a decent human being thing to do. But after that, he says, yeah, so what are you going to do about this? And I expect to hear from you about this, is the kicker at the end of that letter.
Love it.
It seemed very Jalen. I'm sorry he had to be involved in the situation at all. I'm certainly sorry for the fans that fell. And, you know, to have that kind of reaction, to get kicked and to have people come up and say, get the hell off the field, like, come on. Like, that's just so not the way it should have been handled. But big shout out to Jalen Hurts for doing the right thing and saying, what are you going to do about this? And I expect to hear.
Well, speaking of clowns and taking aim at clownish franchises, the Clownageddon is coming to Jacksonville this weekend. And let me be clear, Jacksonville, in terms of leadership in the organization, regardless of what people say, I still consider to be orders of magnitude higher than some other franchises. I think Shad Khan truly does want to put a winning product on the field. He's just made some really bad hires in the process. But the fans are going to let him know, because as soon as they heard that Trent Baalke was staying in Jacksonville as general manager, a torrent of rage and fury and clown emojis have infested Jaguars Twitter, now to the point where there is a full-on campaign for Jacksonville Jaguars fans to show up en masse to the game this weekend against the Colts wearing full-on clown costumes. People are ordering truckloads of little clown noses to hand out to every other fan that doesn't dress up. There's going to be a scene in Jayville this week. Duval is pissed. They do not want Trent Baalke there anymore. And I'll be honest, I think this is going to work, because there's no way that Shad Khan can ignore 50,000 people with clown noses in his own stadium. You can't ignore it. I think that Baalke, his days are numbered if this campaign picks up any more steam.
It's how you get people with a lot of money's attention. It's not by hurting their pocketbook, because let's be honest, billionaires own NFL franchises, and you have to do a lot to infect their bottom line financially. But ego and pride, that's a different chink in the armor. And people are ordering buttons. We've seen Amazon orders for Fire Baalke buttons, clown noses, full-on clown get-ups, grease paint makeup. People are going all different levels, but it's going to be all over. It's picked up a lot of steam. The day after it was announced, if you're on Twitter, certainly if you follow the two of us, you probably are, the clown emoji with the little mustache started popping up everywhere. Like, I was like, what is this? And by the end of the day, there were entire legions of Jacksonville supporters, Duval folks, who had the little clown emoji with a mustache as their icon, thousands and thousands of them. And now this campaign to dress up and sort of show out in stadium, show their displeasure in a way that will definitely land with an owner who I think does want a successful product pretty badly, but has stumbled on the way to get there several times. This is going to hurt. Like, this is embarrassing. Like, there are a lot of not great franchises. The Jets aren't doing great this year. We've talked about the Giants and all of their struggles, and their fan appreciation is a free medium soda. And, like, there have been a lot of sort of PR stumbles, but you're not going to see the Giants stadium packed with people in clown makeup. And if we see that Sunday in Jacksonville, it's going to leave a mark.
That game is really important for a variety of reasons. Visually, just for that image alone, I will be watching that game.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let alone the fact that the Colts haven't won there in like almost a decade. I would tune in just to see pools full of like fully dressed up clowns. You can't get that anywhere else other than Duval. Last news and note here before we get to 3-Up number 1. I want to thank Alejandro and everybody else who joined the Patreon, this week to support the show. We really couldn't do this without folks like you, giving up your hard-earned money to support what we do here. So again, thank you, and also remember this Saturday, this Saturday, January 8th. Oh my God, it's finally here. We are doing the Bootleg Holiday Roundtable, since everybody is now free on Saturdays and can join us for that. It'll be noon Pacific time for everybody in the top 2 levels of the Patreon. That is the Hall of Fame level and the Ring of Honor level. And you can just come hang out with us for an hour and a half before the games start that day, because there are playoff games starting at least 1:30. It'll be 90 minutes long starting at noon. It's kind of like a pregame, Q&A, whatever really you want to make of it type stream for all our patrons. Hope you guys show up. And remember, also as patrons, you guys get merch discounts. So you could check that over at bootlegfootballpodcast.com. All the merch that you want to look through. If you feel like you like anything, 20% off for all patrons. So check that out as well. And with that being said, let's get to probably, at least in my opinion, both the most entertaining and the most impactful game of the week in terms of playoff ramifications, because the Kansas City Chiefs are now on the back foot. They are no longer the number 1 seed in the AFC because of those dastardly Cincinnati Bengals and Joe Burrow taking them down. It was a hell of a game for a lot of reasons. I know Chiefs fans, you're going to scream about refs and a missed false start and a hands to the face penalty in the end zone. You feel like you got cheated out of an opportunity to come back and maybe win. I get that. But I'll tell you what, if you didn't give up literally 1 billion yards to Ja'Marr Chase, you probably would have had a better chance to win in the first place. They were up by 2 touchdowns, not once, but twice. They put up 28 points in the first half. They were firmly in control of the game, and they let Cincy come back. And this is something that I think we've seen far too many times from the Chiefs, where they explode early, defenses adjust, they start shutting them down in the second half, and then for whatever reason, Kansas City historically, a lot of times, runs out of steam. And I think going up against an explosive or an equally explosive offense that can just kind of stay with them and weather that early first half storm that Kansas City historically puts up on people, if they can just stay within striking range, usually in the second half, Kansas City starts to falter a little bit, in my experience. Look back at last year, the Tampa Bay game. Again, it was a similar kind of thing. They put up, I think it was also 28 points in the first half. Just completely wrecked the Buccaneers. Buccaneers made some changes in the second half defensively, made it a game by the end of the fourth quarter. I mean, that was a very, very close game by the last 5 minutes. The difference was Tampa last year wasn't kind of keeping up on offense in the first half, so it was too much of a gap to overcome in the second half, whereas Kansas City, went into halftime. This time, it was only a 9-point game. Bengals were able to keep up with them pretty well and just kind of stay within striking distance so that they could come back at the second half. So this game, to me, kind of reinforced some of the concerns that I've had with the Chiefs over the last couple years in terms of inconsistency. And I think it also reinforced my feelings on Cincinnati's offense, which is you can be schematically perfect. You can have structurally the right call in place. But I'll tell you what, unless you have 3 Pro Bowl corners, you're probably still not going to hold them down forever, because their receivers are, versus 99% of teams out there, their receivers are just better than you. And I think that showed up.
Yeah, this for me really reinforced a couple things, and you touched on it at the top, which is Ja'Marr Chase was absolutely the right pick for this team this year. And there was a lot of debate. And look, Cincinnati still needs offensive line help. A lot of it. It showed up in this game. But that doesn't invalidate their pick of Chase. In fact, this game validated their pick of Ja'Marr Chase because this game came down to Joe Burrow and Ja'Marr Chase. And Ja'Marr Chase changes Cincinnati's ability to keep up with explosive teams. He can flip the tables at a moment's notice. He did it in the first half to keep them close and not be buried by Kansas City or anybody else's onslaught. Oh, yeah, you can do that? We can do that right now, too. Watch. Bam. 65, 70 yards. We got ours. What do you got? And they did it all game. I put out a tweet that said the Bengals are now like the boxer that can take a punch. Right? They're not being down a score, being down 2 scores. That's okay. We got ours. Watch this. Bam. And it's Ja'Marr Chase. Like T. Higgins, really good. Tyler Boyd, excellent as a third receiver. Ja'Marr Chase is the guy. You can throw it to Ja'Marr Chase on any play, and it's a bit like Tyreek Hill was a couple of years ago. He could score from anywhere, anytime, and just bury you. And that changes the entire complexion of Cincinnati, their ability to respond, how dangerous they are in the playoffs, whether or not they're a Super Bowl contender, and I don't say that lightly. Like, he is the guy. And that long reception in the first half that got them back in the running and made it a game before halftime was absolute evidence that things have changed. And look, if this is a year ago, last year's Bengals, or 2 years ago, certainly, forget it. Kansas City's not worried about the refs. They're not worried about Cincinnati. This is a write-off game. This is a rest our starters game. Pre-Burrow, pre-Chase, this is not a worry. Burrow, okay, maybe, but he still doesn't have enough weapons, let's be honest.
Burrow plus Chase.
Burrow plus Chase. Oh, hey, we need some calls, right? Because we're gonna, as you said, not even make some mistakes. We're gonna get burned by that. We're gonna give up some long touchdowns, even though schematically, man for man, we were in a decent position. Mina Kimes put up the dots of when Chase caught the ball and said,
"He just posted up."
Ja'Marr Chase turned this into a touchdown. He's surrounded by 4 Kansas City defenders. Like, that's the X factor. That's the difference. And that makes these Bengals a completely different team. So in terms of Chase or Sewell, like, Chase all day long after this game. He makes them a legitimate threat. And again, we talked about it last week on the Lost podcast. They talked about it on the broadcast. They called it the baby Bengals. Basically 5 Bengals starters on offense, the skill positions, who are all under 25. They're not going anywhere. They're going to be around. 2 of them are 25. 2 of them are less than that. And, you know, one of them's really young. Like, you got Mixon and Burrow both at 25. You got Chase. You got T. Higgins. You got Tyler Boyd. And, you know, Uzama's a decent tight end on top of that, a 6th offensive threat. Like,
6th guy, yeah.
This is not a team that's going anywhere, and they are built for boat racing and track meets. And that's the modern passing NFL. They're going to be around. They're going to be a factor. They won their division for the first time in forever. This was a team that people, including us, said, you know, they're probably coming up. They're going to be like mid. I don't think they're going to win the AFC North, but they're going to compete this year. They're going to go farther than that, folks.
And this was the scenario that Bengals fans were hoping for when they took Burrow first overall.
100%.
Which was within 2 years, they're in contention for the first seed in the AFC. There's still plausible scenarios that they get the first seed. I was actually looking at it earlier today. I'll pull it up right now because I didn't even realize it was still possible until I read this. But going into this week, they can get the number 1 seed, which they're 10-6 right now. They can go 11-6. If they win, Tennessee loses, which they've already lost to Houston this year. It's not that crazy. Tennessee loses, and Kansas City loses, and New England loses. New England against Miami, Kansas City against Denver, like, it's not impossible.
It's not likely,
not impossible,
but it's not impossible.
It's not likely.
Yeah.
But if you told me going into this season that, like, hey, it's week 18 and the Bengals have like a non-zero chance of getting the first seed if stuff breaks their way. Oh, and by the way, they just clinched the AFC North by beating Kansas City. I would have thought you were crazy. And now look at us.
Fully agree. This is a sea change. We knew that Burrow had the juice before he hurt his knee last year. He made enough plays regularly behind zero offensive line help while getting massacred to make you think, nope, this guy's it. They got their quarterback. We said that last year on the podcast. Nope, they didn't make a mistake. They got their guy. They can now go forward and build around him. So this is absolutely the scenario that Bengals fans were hoping for. They were hoping we were right. They were hoping that Cincinnati would add weapons. They did both those things. They added not just a weapon. Like, we need to talk about the fact that Ja'Marr Chase is giving Justin Jefferson a little garbage about breaking his year-old record. And he said, oh, no, I'm going to rip him about it. I'm going to call him up, make sure he knows I did it. Like, they're good-natured, but still, like, they didn't just get a weapon. They got a guy that's like, in the top 10 in receiving in the NFL as a rookie?
Might be top 5.
He's creeping up after that game. I mean, it's so
but
funny.
It's not even like Julio Jones numbers where he puts up 1 million yards and like 3 touchdowns. It's like, oh, by the way, he also has double-digit touchdowns. Like, he does everything.
Yeah, can score from anywhere on the field, can pick up a key first down, contested catch, outrun defensive backs. Like, this is not a guy that's good. This is a guy in the Justin Jefferson mold, and I don't say that lightly because I think that guy's a top 5 receiver in the NFL overall. In his second season, they got that guy. Like, we say there's a lot of receivers available, and there are, and there's very good ones that can fill roles. There's not a lot of those guys. Those guys are rare. When Devontae Adams looks at a Justin Jefferson and says, no, he's a guy I watch. He's doing it the right way. Like, he's farther along at his point than I was at mine in year 2. You listen, because Devontae Adams is clearly the best receiver in the NFL. People are going to say the same thing, if they're not already, about Ja'Marr Chase really quickly. They got that guy, and that's not a guy you get at 28. That's not a guy you get, second round, third round, unless you're extremely lucky or there's something else going on. That's a guy you get in the top 10. They got him there. He's making the difference he's supposed to, and it is a completely different team because of it.
I'm really excited to see how far this Bengal team goes, because I really think that the key to being like an actual Super Bowl contender is quarterback and weapons. If you got those two things, even if you just have an average defense, you can win. Like, Kansas City didn't win the Super Bowl because of Steve Spagnuolo holding down Jimmy Garoppolo. They won it because Pat Mahomes retreated 14 yards behind the line of scrimmage and threw a crazy-ass ball on wasps to Tyreek Hill. And, Travis Kelce making plays. And, like, that's why they won. Like, obviously the defense helps, and the defense in the regular season this year, was able to help Kansas City survive long enough for the offense to get back on track. But Steve Spagnuolo's defense is not why people consider Kansas City a frontrunner. It's Mahomes, it's Tyreek, it's Kelce, it's Andy Reid, it's all those guys. So if you want to be an actual contender for a Super Bowl, you need to have a quarterback and you need to have weapons, and Cincinnati's got that. So as far as I'm concerned, they're in it. Like, they're in that group of, like, not just, oh, they're one and done, or, oh, it's a feel-good story, they made it. It's like, oh, no, shit, like, they're real, like, they can do this thing. Burrow, he's a serial killer. Ja'Marr Chase, he's a freak. Higgins, he's a monster. Boyd, best number 3 in the league. Mixon, freak. And by the way, the defense is at least average.
Interesting fact, if I asked you where they are in sacks as a team, what number rank would you say they are in sacks? Cincinnati. Not a huge sack team.
Well, it seems like every time I watch them, I see that defensive line all over people, so gotta be top 10.
The Titans and the Bengals have the same number of sacks. They're tied for 10th. If I'd said that to you, if I'd said that to you before the season, you would have been like, well, I don't know, the Bengals are all right, but like the Titans line is really good.
That's the thing, is like that they're sneaky in so many different ways.
Yeah, and they got Jesse
Bates. The offense
Bates.
gets a lot of the publicity, but
yeah, and they're hanging out.
Bates is tremendous.
Bates is tremendous in the back end. They've gotten really good play out of their corners, including free agents. The linebackers we really like. They invested heavily in linebackers last year. Some of those guys have been injured. Jermaine Pratt didn't play in this game. So there's yeah, they're good enough on defense and on offense. If they're clicking right now, no one wants to play them. Like, no defensive coordinator in their right mind is like, oh, yeah, give me that.
I'll bet you Kansas City doesn't either, because remember, I brought up that Tampa game in the regular season last year. Well, when they faced Tampa again, Tampa just did the thing they did in the second half over again, and they fucking killed them. Like, yeah, we could talk about offensive line injuries for Kansas City, but, like, schematically, they couldn't do anything. Mm-hmm. Like, it wasn't just a protection issue. Nobody was open. And I worry that the Bengals, who in the first half did the thing that really, really bothers me, that teams do against Kansas City, is they sit there in a single high structure and they say, we're in cover 3, and then they dare Pat to not just hit endless crossing routes and deep sevens and all that kind of stuff, and they got murdered in the first half. Absolutely murdered, because they just sat there in single high structures and Pat was throwing bombs down the field. And then in the second half, they adjusted. What I worry about for Kansas City is if they have to play Cincinnati again, they're just going to take that second half game plan, just like Tampa did, put it in the first half, and say, now what you got? Can you beat us when we're in quarters? Can you beat us when we're in cover 2? You know, can you beat us when we're showing too high and then coming down to one cross and trapping you over the middle? What do you got? Historically speaking, Kansas City has struggled against those kind of looks. They've gotten a little bit better this year, but they're still not, like, amazing. What do they got? And I worry about Kansas City. I really do. Obviously, Mahomes is amazing. Tyreek, Kelsey, all of them, like, they're all top tier for a reason. But this has been a problem for years now. And I feel like if the Bengals come with the exact same adjustment, it might not be as close as it was this time.
It's going to be this. This is why I'm excited about the football that's left this year. Week 18 and into the playoffs, first round, second round. There are going to be matchups. There are going to be stories. And having followed it as closely as we have from early in the spring and summer, doing divisional previews on through the preseason, all 18 weeks of the season, there's so many storylines. Health is going to play a huge factor, as it always does. Injuries, COVID. Chris Collinsworth made a really good point on the Monday Night broadcast about, tell me who's playing. Right? Tell me who's playing, and I'll tell you who I think's going to win. Oh, okay. You know, he's right. So it's interesting, but there's going to be so many good angles. And honestly, I hope we've illuminated some of those where you're going to see the story behind the story, or the matchup behind the matchup, the scheme on scheme, coordinator versus coordinator, the sort of second layer. If we've done any of that for you, if we've brought any of those storylines to your attention that you're going to watch a little bit more closely or with a little bit more information as you go in, and that ups your enjoyment, then what we're doing is worth it.
Why don't we get to 3-up number 2? Keep it with the AFC West. The Raiders will not die. A few weeks ago, we talked about how it was the same old song and dance out in Vegas. Start strong, flounder down the stretch. It looked like it was going to be the exact same thing, and all of a sudden they won, and then they won again, and then they just beat the Colts, and we're like, wait a minute. The Raiders, who were absolutely left for dead 2 weeks ago, like, if they mathematically had a chance, but I was like, there's no way. Like, they're out. They're in a win-and-in scenario all of a sudden, because they just beat Indy handily. And, like, when you watch that game, I know the score was close, but there was some stuff that went Indy's way in that game that is not, sustainable. This is a legitimate scenario now where the Raiders can force their way back in the playoffs, when literally less than a month ago I was like, there's absolutely no chance. They're out.
Yeah, this is the zombie Raiders team. This is the team that won't die. They keep getting knocked down. They keep getting up and dragging on. And to do it against a Colts team that, had more momentum, certainly, than they did 3 weeks ago, it is a sort of turn of fortune that I don't think either one of us would have predicted. We said, oh, they've got to win this week or they're out. They didn't win that week, but they won the next week. And we're kind of like, well, all right, well, at least they turned it around. They didn't just go on a straight skid for the end of the year. But now they've set up, I don't know, one of the most dramatic games of the season, which is literally the last game of the regular season. It's the Sunday night game versus the Chargers, and it's a win and in scenario game. Like, it's a super meaningful game, and this team will not die. Until further notice, I'm going to call them the Zombie Raiders because they have suffered every possible injury this year, every possible scenario, the firing of their coach, stuff off the field, stuff on the field, their regular slide, going forward under interim leadership. Like, they have every excuse to just fold their tents and say, nope, we're going to make vacation plans. Nope. They're out there beating teams that a month ago we were like, these guys are the guys that are going to be nipping at the heels of a playoff spot. The Colts are going to be that team. They beat the Colts, and now they can beat the Chargers, who've been up and down. Chargers had a decisive win this week, but have been up and down in the last few weeks. Again, it's not impossible that the Raiders are going to work their way into the playoffs. And I feel like there's a couple of teams in the NFL like this year. The Eagles were a team that everybody wrote off and were like, nah, new staff, young team. They don't know how to win. Like, here we are at the end of the season, and like, the Eagles have their shot. Like, there are just these teams that will not. The Steelers could make the playoffs.
Dude, I cannot believe that is a. Have you seen everything that has to go right?
Oh yeah, no, it's not a good chance. But again, if I told you 3 weeks ago that the Steelers could still be in the playoff hunt at this point in the season, you would have been like, that team's playing terribly. Ben is cooked. Like, there is no possible way. There's literally a possible way that the Steelers could make the playoffs. Am I saying they're gonna? No, I'm not. I will not be putting my money on that chance. But like the Raiders, the Steelers, the Eagles, these are teams that a lot of people piled on mid-season and said, nah, they don't have what it takes. They're not going to be there at the final gun. Literally going into the last week of the season, all three of those teams,
what's hilarious about it though is, so if the Steelers beat the Ravens, which considering all the Ravens injuries, not that hard to imagine. The Ravens are super beat up. And then if the Clownageddon somehow takes a toll on Indy and they lose again in Jacksonville somehow, not saying it'll happen, but let's just say it does. You know how the Steelers can still be eliminated?
I know.
Theoretically, if the Colts lose in Jacksonville,
yes,
the Raiders and the Chargers can just kneel every play and tie, and they both go to the playoffs, which would then eliminate Pittsburgh. If the Raiders and the Chargers play a real game and one of them wins, then the Steelers make it in if they win and the Colts lose. So
you want to hear
they could theoretically just do that and completely screw the Steelers.
You want to hear a really funny story about that? Football history? So this scenario has happened before. I believe it happened in the Ivy League. And it was it was a situation a very long time ago where both teams would benefit from basically nothing happening, right? So get this. One team possessed the ball for the first half. And the second half, the second team possessed the ball. And you know what it was the birth of?
The 4-minute offense.
The down structure in modern football.
Oh, so we're talking like long time. What,
right.
They just move it a yard at a time or something like that?
Kept it. And then they were like, well, we can't have that again, so we need a down structure. Like, you need to go so far in each play to actually... Yeah. So that's
amazing.
A long time ago, but it would be fascinating to see the Raiders and the Chargers get noticed that like that scenario was in play and go, hey guys, we both benefit if we do this, so just take a knee every time. Punt it.
Dude, that would be an all-time Sunday night broadcast of just Chris and Al tap dancing for an hour and a half.
You know what I would want to see?
Rotating kneels.
Is like a live cam on the sports books in Vegas.
Oh God. I mean, how do you even handle that?
Yeah, like there would be a lot of that going
That's
on.
millions of dollars.
Primetime TV. Well, they're just kneeling down. Nobody gets any yards.
God, I hope it happens. I hope the Colts lose so bad. I just want to see it happen.
I really
not
don't.
that I dislike the Colts, but I want to see that.
But I really don't think, even though that's the scenario, I don't think they can turn it off. Like NFL coaches, executives, players, they're wired. This is a meritocracy. Wins matter for contracts, for being around next year, for being renewed. How people look at you. Like wins is the currency in the NFL. I don't think anybody could give one up. And just go.
Unless you're Doug Peterson and you intentionally throw a game to eliminate your division rival.
Which is a whole nother scenario that we'll talk about on a different show. But fascinating stuff out of Raiders Colts. The game itself was pretty interesting, and the Raiders showed guts. Like they didn't get handed this one, right? They made plays down the stretch, and they made it happen. And I don't know. I'm impressed. This Raiders team has gone through pretty much everything this year. And again, they've got a shot late, and it's because they earned it. They kept grinding.
And on the other side, I do want to say I'm a little bit worried about the Colts' ability to win the Super Bowl because, as I said earlier, it is a quarterback and weapons league. And their quarterback right now is not playing anywhere near the Burrows, the Mahomeses, obviously the Bradys and the Rod. Like that's not even a discussion. Like it's a different sport that we're talking about here in terms of the passing game for the Indianapolis Colts versus every other top contending team. If you stop Jonathan Taylor, even if you just remotely slow down Jonathan Taylor, this offense is dead. Like you look at Wentz on third down in this game, they went 3 for 11 on third down, and he was missing dudes wide open. It's not even like, oh, it was pressure and the offensive line. Like, no, Wentz had some clean pockets, and he was straight up missing people. 3rd and 14, throws it into the bleachers over Pascal's head. 3rd and 8, had T.Y. open by 15 yards on a coverage bust, missed him for an easy touchdown. His one touchdown of the day, 45-yarder, which was like a third of his yardage for the entire afternoon. It was 1st and 10, and he threw up a prayer ball for no reason that was literally in the hands of a Raiders DB at the goal line. And then his buddy was also trying to go for it, knocked it out of his hand, went up in the air, T.Y. caught it for a touchdown. That was an interception. Like, it was a bad ball. And he just happened to get a touchdown out of it. This isn't sustainable. Like, this is bad.
No, it's really bad. And the point you made is the point that we've been hammering on all year, 2 years, as long as we've been around, which is in the modern NFL, you need to be able to pass the ball. And if you're going to pass the ball well and efficiently, it starts with two things. It starts with a head coach and or offensive coordinator. A lot of times those are mixed these days, again, because of the importance, and a quarterback that can execute and can make plays even when there aren't plays there. And if you have those two things, you've got a chance in this league. And you can look at last year's playoffs, right? Last year's Final Four was Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Pat Mahomes, and Josh Allen. Okay. Like, all four of those teams have something in common, which is a top flight passer. And if you go to the round before that, you throw in the Saints, they had Breeze. You throw in Browns, who had a healthy Mayfield who was on a run. You throw in Lamar for the Ravens. And then you throw in, Jared Goff for the Rams before the Stafford trade. Like, again, still 6 out of the 8 have, like, really good passers. And Wentz, a month ago, teased everybody and had a couple of those games that looked like primetime Wentz. And everybody went, ta-ha! Chris Ballard, Frank Reich, they were right. They went out, bargain basement. They got Wentz. He's doing it. He's going to round into form, and he's going to propel this offense. But I'm with you. If you stack the box right now and just challenge them to run Taylor into that all day, Wentz cannot beat you. You can stack 8, maybe 8.5 in the box right now and go for it, big guy. And you're not going to lose because he is not making opposing defenses pay in the way that he was a month ago. And that will peter out. When you say it's not sustainable, they will hit a point, probably early in the playoffs, where they come up against somebody that isn't like that. A Mahomes, a Burrow, an Allen, a Brady, a whoever, and they're going to get wiped out. Like, the defense is really good for the Colts. It's not that good. They're going to get wiped out.
I have this like impending sense of dread that they're going to go up against a team that
has firepower.
Yeah. Like the Bengals.
Yeah.
Bengals Colts today, if that happened. Like, again, I like the Colts defense. They don't have anybody that can cover Jamar Chase. They cannot keep up with the Bengals through the air at all.
And
like,
that's
unless Jonathan Taylor has like the most ridiculous game you've ever seen.
Yeah.
And kills the clock and puts up points and gets 30 carries and like 150 yards and 3 touchdowns, which when they beat Buffalo, that's what happened. He had a bazillion yards and 4 touchdowns, and we're like, whoa, where'd that come from? Jonathan Taylor. But they need that kind of game from him to beat those kinds of teams.
And they're not going to
get... how often can you rely on that?
Yeah, they're not going to get 3 of those in a row, right? And that's the thing about the playoffs. It's one and done. You might get one. You might get lucky in the first one. You need to get lucky in the first one. If Wentz is not going to... Maybe they get lucky and Wentz lights it up again, but that's not been, the best indicator of future performance is past performance. His past performance over the past 3 or 4 weeks has been not inspiring. It does not lead you to believe that he's got one of those in his back pocket. Now, maybe he pulls one out. Great. And maybe Taylor has that game the next week. Right, where he just runs wild or the run fits are terrible, or maybe like we talked about, health, injuries, COVID, the best run fitter on the other team is out, and, Taylor exploits that for those kind of numbers. But you're not going to get the next one, right? You're then going to go up against one of the top 5-6 quarterbacks in the league who can score points when they want to, and you can't. And if you go down, if this Colts team right now goes down 10 points, they can't make it up. They can make up one of those scores, but they can't make up 2 right now. Whereas we just talked about it with Burrow and the Bengals. They go down 2 scores like, hey, we can get one back anytime we want, pretty much. Like, we can flick a switch and get 7 points. The Colts are just not like that. And you get to playoff football, everything compresses, including decision-making, gets a little bit tighter. They don't have that explosion right now. And that, I think, like you, is going to be their downfall pretty soon, if they do make the playoffs.
All their explosion comes from one guy who's got how many touches on him now at this point in the season? It's just, you break down, man. You break down eventually, and they need something to complement Jonathan Taylor, who's a remarkable player. Absolutely should be considered for MVP because I shudder to think of what this team would be like without him. But you need more, and I don't at this point believe that they have more. 3 up, 3. The Cardinals finally got out of their funk, had a 3-game skid, came back and beat a very, very talented team from Dallas. I'll be honest, I didn't know they still had this in them, but when Kyler's having one of those weeks where he's just throwing absolutely gorgeous deep balls, and, he's showing his mobility and juking people out of their shoes in space. And the defense has a pretty decent day overall. In fact, I'd say more than decent, pretty good day overall. It was a nice reminder of what the Cardinals are capable of after 3 straight weeks of what the hell is this? It was nice to see that they can still be that team. I'm still not entirely sure how far they can go without DeAndre Hopkins and J.J. Watt. I haven't checked on their injury status. I know he might be coming back, but...
Watt could come back. Hop is out, so...
Hop is for sure done, right?
Not for sure yet, but much more serious. Watt is pretty likely to come back. He's one of those late season, early playoff additions, kind of like Derrick Henry, that could really change that team's fortunes.
Do you see Henry's practicing?
No, Henry is most certainly back Titans are in the playoffs. Like he's been running for a week in cleats on grass, and he's back to full practice. Like now, he's for sure going to be available, and whoa, that's a whole different team with him around.
If Tennessee gets the first seed and he gets that extra week off and he comes out in the divisional round, oh shit, that's a different landscape. Totally different landscape. Because unlike some other teams, Tennessee can run the ball with Derrick Henry, but also has Tannehill and A.J. Brown, and they have other weapons in the air that can actually complement their run game. And by the way, their defense is good too. Keep an eye on that one. But back to Cardinals. I'm still not entirely sure how far they're going to go because they are banged up, and they do have, in my opinion, some pretty clear weaknesses that need to be addressed this offseason, particularly along the offensive line. But you still have Kyler Murray. You still have A.J. Green, who I think is having a renaissance season, in my opinion. You still have some other explosive weapons. Edmonds is back. And the defense, I think, has really come to play in a few games recently and shown that they're not entirely a corpse either. There's still something there. Am I putting them up with the Green Bays? Not anymore. Maybe when they were all healthy, absolutely. But there's still something there, and I think this game showed that, of like, hey, when Kyler's on, they're tough to beat.
You know what I really want out of a quarterback? Like, I swear to God, there's so many factors in scouting a quarterback. But, like, you know what I really want? If I'm a team that needs a quarterback and I'm going to the Senior Bowl or I'm going to the Shrine Bowl or I'm going to the Combine, you know what I want out of a quarterback? Like, badly.
The ability to throw a fade? What?
Guy that can just flick it. And there's a few guys in this league that can flick it. Kyler is a guy that can flick it. Aaron Rodgers is a guy, we saw it again versus the Vikings in 10-degree temperatures, can just flick it. Flick of the wrist, right? Allen can flick it. Herbert can flick it, right? We saw a little bit of Trey Lance flicking it this week, which is kind of fun.
He had a couple throws that were like, okay.
He flicked it. He threw some bullets. I want a guy that can flick it. Like, there's guys that can throw it, right? I think like Tannehill is a guy that can throw it. Like, he has a good arm and he can throw it. And I would take Tannehill if I was a quarterback needy team. Absolutely. But if I'm like up in the top 10 and have been there perennially and I've got my shot now and I need a quarterback, I don't just want a guy that can throw it. Like, I want a guy that can flick it because there's so many plays where the window is so small. Got a guy in your face. You're on the move. You don't have the great arm angle, and you just see these guys. Mahomes can flick it. He flicked a couple this week that were just, what? Right? He's just moving sideways. He just, that's the one I need. I need 20 yards and guys right there.
Just, his body's turning that way and the ball's going that way.
And I just, and Kyler, I'm fading back. I got a guy in my face. I'm not the tallest guy. And it's 35 yards on a line. Like, I want a guy that can flick it. Like, that is a difference maker in this league. And Kyler shows that. And that, to me, is the clear difference between, like, Cardinals-Colts right now. Two teams that are in similar situations. I would take the Colts never with Wentz playing the way he is right now.
Which is ironic because, like, they just played, was it a week ago, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
And Indy beat them. Mm-hmm. And I still think, like, in my head, like, hey, if they play 10 times, how many of those are Arizona winning? How many is Indy winning?
I would say 7, because occasionally Taylor's going to get loose. Occasionally Wentz might have his game. That's 2 out of 10. Like, and just bad bounces or, special teams return. I'll give the Colts 1 more, but not more than that. I'd say the other 7 out of 10 are Cardinals wins. So just a sort of snapshot postcard of where the league is right now. You got to have that guy at quarterback. He's got to extend a couple of drives. He's got to make a couple of plays with movement outside the pocket, whether it's with his arm or extending plays by running for a first down. Like, it doesn't have to be Lamar mobility. That's not the thing. Kyler's got great quicks. We all know that, but got to be able to flick it and pick up a couple of downs, turn a couple of series that shouldn't go your way. That's what's going to get you through that game in the playoffs you shouldn't win.
Let's get to 3 down number 1. Things are still not all sunshine and rainbows over in Carolina. Panthers have now lost 6 straight. Keep in mind, they started the year 3-0, by the way.
Yeah.
I can't remember the last time I saw a team start 3-0 and then finish it on a 6, potentially 7-game losing streak.
Feels like a Raiders thing.
But worse?
Yeah. No,
Like,
worse
way
because
worse?
there's like no real hope. And again, what's the difference between the Panthers and the Raiders, even the Raiders that had those big slides? Like the Raiders still had their quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
And the Panthers clearly don't. And again, this is a team that we were both super excited about in our divisional preview. We love their talent. They went all defense in last year's draft and then the most current draft. They added weapons and free agency, and we were like, the arrow's pointing up. Like, we like this team. And for the first for the first month of the year, we were like, yep, we're right. This is good. And then the wheels fell off, and now we're here, and it feels very, very different. If I told you mid-season the Panthers would only win 5 games, and that's very likely because the Bucs have said, no, we're not going to rest our starters. Arians has said, we're going to play to win. So the Bucs should, in theory, crush the Panthers, and that would mean they win 5 games on the year. If I told you that, and I told you that they would fire Joe Brady mid-season, if I said the Panthers, again, in our divisional preview, think back to last summer, sunny weather, brats, hot dogs, baseball games. If I told you this Panthers team with all this talent is going to win 5 games and they're going to fire Joe Brady halfway through the season, you would have been like, what are the odds? Like, sure, I'll take that, right? You would have taken that in a heartbeat. Well, here we are. They're going to win 5 games and Joe Brady's long gone. Things are not good. And for me, I think that puts Rule on the hot seat. And a lot of people say, no, they're going to stay the course. Patience in the NFL is a vaunted commodity, and it's gotten a lot shorter. People see that you can turn teams around quickly. We were just talking about Kyler, right? They had drafted a quarterback high the year before. They were like, nope, we're getting a new coach. We're getting a new quarterback in the top 10. We're going to change things. And, things happen more quickly. There is no 5-year plan, 7-year plan. That ain't
the Eagles have a 1-year plan. They're in the playoffs.
I agree.
Like, how can you look at the rest of the NFC? Like, fucking Sean Payton keeping the Saints together, potentially
with
making
nothing.
the playoffs with nothing. He's got 4 quarterbacks that have played this year. And they're still potentially going to make the playoffs. They just have to win. And I think the Niners need to lose. There's no excuse.
I think Rule is miscalculating this. He's thinking of this in a more collegiate sense, which makes sense. That's where he came from. And at Baylor, it took 3 years to turn it around. And he's thinking, I have at least 3 years. And everybody else is thinking, he's got at least 3 years. And I'm like, are you sure? You had a lot. Like, this team is in no way bereft of talent. Do they need offensive line help? They do. Do they need a quarterback? Obviously, they do. They probably need something else at running back. I love CMC, but he has a lot of trouble staying on the field. But you can get a running back. We've talked about that. Do they have wide receivers? They do, right? Do they have a great defense? They do in terms of talent. Like, this is not a team that's bottom of the barrel. You don't get 5 years to turn this team around. This is your second year, and you bottomed out. You won 5 games with all that talent. Like, there are going to be some questions. Do I guarantee he's going to get canned? Not even in the slightest. Would I be surprised if he does? Not totally.
But he's now, like, even if he doesn't get fired, he's now firmly in the group where we're, like, looking ahead to 2022 is like, hey, bud, if it's week 8, week 9 next year and you're nowhere close, you're done. Because if it's already starting this year, and how many times have we seen this? Like, we see it with Mike Zimmer now, where it was already starting last year. And now we see what happened this year. Like, it's almost guaranteed. Nagy, it was starting last year. Fire Nagy. And they brought him back again. And by week 7, Bears fans were like, what are you waiting for?
Oh, yeah, and Joe Judge.
I think Rule's now, and Joe Judge, like, I think Rule's now in that category where it's like, if they don't fire him this year, if he doesn't turn around by mid-season next year, week 8, he's out. There's no way.
Well, that's the thing is he won't continue, and it's just it's troublesome. I feel for Panthers fans because they hopefully bought into the hype like they should have. This is not a bad team. This is a pretty decent team that has underachieved, and that starts to point towards the coach really quickly.
Speaking of Zimmer, by the way, so the Vikings just went out with a whimper, being generous about it.
Yeah.
Vikings fans, again, the Zimmer discussion has been a thing for, 3 years now? Feels like it. Because Vikings fans got real tired of, we're in the wild card round. Oh, okay, season's over. Like, they got real tired of almost being it. They made the NFC Championship game one time after a miracle from Stephon Diggs and then got destroyed by the Eagles. And like that was the top of the Zimmer era, was getting beat by 3 possessions in the NFC Championship game, and that was 4 years ago. It's been kind of all downhill from there. And this last Sunday against the Packers was the punctuation mark to that. Just outplayed in every sense of the word. You're trotting out Sean Mannion rather than Kellen Mond, who you just drafted in the 3rd round, which, by the way, rookie quarterbacks are job security in the NFL. If your young quarterback shows something, owners are less inclined to fire the coach because they don't want to destabilize the environment for a young quarterback that has promise. If you throw Mond out there and he looks good, if he looks even halfway decent, it's better for your job security. He throws out Sean Mannion, who does Sean Mannion things, doesn't put in Kellen Mond until they're down by, 27? With 8 minutes to go. You're not getting anything out of that. That to me showed that, Zimmer's done. He's probably out.
Look, this is a terrible setup. And we're not going to say that this is a game the Vikings should have won. Very unlikely the Vikings win this game in any case. Kirk Cousins healthy or not. Aaron Rodgers is playing at an obscene level of excellence for the 2nd year in a row. It's in Lambeau. It's 10 degrees. You're not probably winning either way, right? But Cousins is out with COVID. You trot out Mannion because he's more senior, because he's a veteran, and Mike Zimmer has a long-standing history of loving veterans, and I understand that. But again, what you said makes a ton of sense. Like, if you show the owners, hey, this Mond guy's got some promise, and we got beat anyways, but we were probably going to get beat no matter what. But there's some life here. We played with any kind of, fight. And then you hear things coming out of the Vikings locker room talking about their co-defensive coordinators. Is this ring any bells? Because we talked about this in our divisional preview episode. We were like, what is this? Zim's kid is co-DC with Andre. What is that? What does that really mean?
That's new.
Yeah, that's odd. That's a weird structure. We get it. Coach's kid. I mean, that's the same thing in New England, right? We had to ask who the actual defensive play caller was. Oh, it's Belichick's kid. Okay, cool. It's not unheard of, but now, look, the Vikings are in a bad place because teams in a bad place, leaks start to come out, and they are the kind that say, well, this is really screwy and we hate it. So a lot of nepotism comments about Zimmer's kid being in DC, him being undeserving of that role, not having earned it. You trot out Sean Mannion, and then in the post-game presser, somebody says, so, this didn't work out so well. Do you think you want to look at Mond? And Zimmer, in Zimmer ice-cold fashion, says, no. And the press corps, shakes their head. And then somebody, some brave reporter, some brave soul offers up, Coach, why not? He's like, because I see him every day, period. Okay.
Yikes.
No matter what you need to say about Kellen Mond as a coach, no matter how you feel about him as a player, this serves no one. Like, you can say, look, he's not feeling great, or, I thought he was going to get crushed versus the Packers defense, and, Mannion's got a little bit more experience at game speed. You can say a billion coach speak things and get away from this. Zimmer has never been one.
Crush the kid.
Yeah, Zimmer has never been one to dodge. And instead, he just leaves that hanging in the air. And I don't really think it was his intent to crush Kellen. I don't. He was just... Oh, he absolutely 100% did. There is no disagreement with that at all. This is Zimmer in a nutshell. And this is the reason it took him a long time to get a head coaching spot in the first place. This was the knock on Zimmer, is he's not going to sugarcoat it. And some people love that. Well, Minnesota fans don't love it anymore because it's pretty much 8-8 and he's still towing the line. And if you have, I said, man, I hope Kellen Mond is renting on Twitter. And a lot of people came back and said, I hope Zimmer's renting because Zimmer's going to be out of town before Mond. People are done with Mike Zimmer. And if you're, again, the Vikings ownership, we talk about not having necessarily a bottom line function that the rest of us do because you're a billionaire. They do have a pride piece. They do have a perception piece that needs to be satiated. And if you, as the Minnesota ownership group, says, hey, everybody, buy season tickets again, Zim's back, it's going to be a really tough sell after what is a very Vikings, unfortunately for Vikings fans, a very Vikings limp to the finish in 2021 that doesn't have a lot of bright spots. Like, this team needs a reset at coach. They need a new perspective, and they have to figure out what they're going to do with Kirk. That's a separate deal. But Zimmer is not bringing anything to this team. Zimmer is a known. You know what you're getting. It's going to be middle of the road, and that's it. That's what you're getting.
I mean, I know we're fond of the Bears here, but I just feel bad. I feel bad for Vikings fans.
I absolutely do. Even as a division rival, I feel bad for Vikings fans because that team is talented. You got Justin Jefferson, you got Thielen.
We've said the same thing every year. It's like, oh, they're so talented.
I know, and that is an absolute indictment of coaching. When you look at that team and you go, man, they got Barr and Kendricks. The defensive line has been above average for a long time in terms of creating pass rush. Like, they're one of the spots we go, oh man, there's this talented athletic pass rusher. I hope he goes to Minnesota because he'll develop, right? They've had corners. They have Harrison Smith at safety. Cousins, when he's hot, he's hot. They had, Irv Smith, who unfortunately got hurt at tight end. They got Justin Jefferson, one of the top 5 receivers in the league that they hit on as a rookie. They got Adam Thielen, who is incredibly productive as a 2. Like, they got a great tackle. Like, they got talent, right? This team
they got
should
2
be
great tackles.
I know this team should be winning, and they're not, and they haven't been. And it's not an aberration, or you got a lot of guys hurt, or you had a lot of guys out because of COVID. This is the Mike Zimmer experience, and yes, I feel bad for Vikings fans, and I say that unabashedly as a Bears fan. Like, I look at that situation and I go, man, if the Bears had that much talent and they were still putting up middling results and had no chance against, the Aaron Rodgers of the world, it's not an easy burden to bear, and they've got some changes coming. I hope.
You know who I feel even worse for, though?
Yes. Yes, I do.
Giants fans.
Yeah.
Oh, Giants fans. Where do we even begin? This has been not the year from hell, not the regime from hell. This has been the decade from hell. Since 2011, when you won the Super Bowl against none other than Tom Brady himself for the second time in a 5-year period. You've been rebuilding since that Super Bowl. Over and over and over and over again. Failing over and over and over again. Every single time Giants fans get a glimmer of hope, it gets crushed. And what's worse about it is now we're at the point where they don't have any hope, and the bar is so low that now we are literally having to go negative to still disappoint them. The Giants, as an offense, just had, I'm not even kidding, the worst passing day ever with net negative 10 passing yards, taking into account the Mike Glennon experience of, 24 passing yards? 34 maybe? I think it was 24. And then when you include all of his sack yardage, because he got sacked 4 times in this game by a defense that has been missing Khalil Mack since, week 10, something like that. Negative 10 passing yards in the modern NFL. I don't know if I've ever seen that, but holy shit. I mean, I thought we could, maybe find rock bottom eventually for these Giants fans that have been hurting so much, and we're now underground. We are under rock bottom. I don't know where else to go from here.
You know what the good news is?
Joe Judge is coming back.
That's not good news. That doesn't count. You know what the good news is?
What?
You had more passing yards than the Giants on Sunday.
Hey, where's my millions?
Exactly. This is terrible. This is extended terrible, worse than terrible. It's the Mike Glennon revenge game, just in reverse. He's getting revenge on his current team instead of his former team. That's not the way it's supposed to work. No, this is a really rough game. Like, this is the feel good game for anybody that plays them, and you don't want your team to ever be in that situation. Like the saying goes, you never want to be the most famous person on Twitter, because it's probably bad, right? You never want to be the team that everybody gets healthy against. And for a long time, it was the Lions. Now it's not the Lions. The Lions are playing tough football. The Giants are a team that everybody gets healthy against. Like the Bears, who are a admittedly terrible team this year, smoked them. Like, this game wasn't even close. It was never competitive. They didn't even try and throw it for most of the game. And they still ended up with negative 10 overall passing yards. And by the way, no, Brett, you've never seen that, because it's never happened before. Individual players have had negative passing yard days, but they got pulled mid-game and their replacement actually racked up some positive yardage. So there has never been a negative 10-yard passing day for an entire team ever. This is a record. This is, like you said, digging underground to find new lows for a franchise that doesn't need to do it. They've had plenty of lows. It's not great. And the thing that kills me is this franchise is committed, we talked about this last week on the one that got erased, to bringing back Joe Judge and Danny Dimes. And that is, again, I talked about it earlier in this podcast. What are the 2 things you need to compete in the modern NFL? A head coach / play caller that's got it, and a quarterback. If you have those things, you can compete. And the Giants have said, the Maras have said, hey, you can come be GM of our franchise, but those things are locked in and they're terrible. Good luck. And you also mentioned on last week's podcast that their salary cap situation sucks. They have like the 3rd least money available, or 6th least money available.
It's bottom 6 somewhere in there.
In free agency, it's like $6 million free. Like, this is not a team that can buy its way out of the hole. It does have some draft picks, but you've already said to the new GM, like, you get Joe Judge and Daniel Jones. So guaranteed turnovers, and a guy that right now is just grasping at straws and seems ever closer to completely disconnected with reality. Like, if I'm a GM candidate, I'm not licking my chops to get a hold of this opportunity, Big Apple or no. I'm like, wait, what? I have to keep those 2 guys? And they're like, mm-hmm. And my question as a thinking human being is, why? What have they done to deserve that? And the answer is they haven't, but for some reason, the Giants crave stability so much that they'll take awful stability over change.
Oh, God. Well, with that being said, I won't torture Giants fans anymore. Oh, wait, yes, I will. Let's talk about the Eagles being successful. 3 interesting, number 1. The Eagles are now a playoff team. I think every Giants fan, by the way, just shut this podcast off in disgust.
Oh, they threw their phone at the wall
okay.
like 10 minutes
They'll
ago.
Be back. They'll be back. They'll be back.
Once they get a new phone.
The Eagles made the playoffs officially this week. They clinched a playoff berth, and I want to highlight, and we talked about this in the offseason preview. We talked about how, hey, it's like, hey, their staff is young and green, and like I said specifically, it's like, I don't know what we're going to get out of it, but it's possible that, maybe there's some hiccups early and then they come on strong late. We'll see. Again, they don't have any tendencies established, so they're a little bit harder to prepare for than maybe some seasoned coaches where you kind of know what they want to do. And I was like, let's see what they got here. It's possible. Like, again, I really like Jalen Hurts as a quarterback coming out of Alabama/OU. So I had what's the word? Cautious optimism. There could be something there. Even me being cautiously optimistic, I still wasn't sure, like, oh yeah, this is a playoff team. And yet here we are. It's a first-time head coach, a first-time defensive coordinator, a first-time special teams coordinator. By the way, you know who their special teams coordinator is?
I did last summer because I wrote the agenda.
You remember Michael Clay from Oregon?
Oh, yeah.
The linebacker?
Yeah.
Came out like in 2013. Like, he's 30 years old. And he's the special teams coordinator.
Their staff
I'm pretty sure he and Justin Herbert probably shared a teammate or two.
Yeah, their staff is incredibly young, but I'll let you continue with the rankings.
It's crazy. And he's the youngest of the bunch, but not by much. Shane Steichen. Might be Steichen. I think I made that mistake last summer too. I still can't remember exactly which one it is. He's a second-year offensive coordinator. He only has one full year of play calling, and it was last year with the Chargers before they reset their whole staff. But he was, again, play caller for a record-setting campaign by Justin Herbert. So he's second-year OC, and he's the most seasoned of the group. Then you got a quarterback with barely a year of starting experience because he got thrown in like week 11, week 12 last year, if I remember correctly. This was his first full year starting with Jalen Hurts. The youngest group of coordinators / head coach I can remember in a long time, average age of 36. Like, I'm pretty sure Tom Brady's older. Actually, no, he is older than their entire staff because Nick Sirianni's the oldest one. He's 40. Like, it's crazy how green this group is. Head coach, coordinator, and quarterback, and they're in the playoffs.
You did say it. You just said
green.
That the Eagles coaching staff is green. Okay, so we've got our joke of the weekend. We said this on the preview podcast, and it's stark when you go through the entire league end to end. One of the real benefits of that exercise is you look at rosters and you stack them comparatively. You look at coaching staffs and you stack them comparatively. You look at number of coaches because not all NFL teams have the same number of coaches. Some invest more in their coaching staff, some invest less. You look at age, you look at experience, which are not the same thing. And overall, like, by far, the Eagles coaching staff was the youngest and the least experienced. And I haven't done the math on it, but I bet if you added up the NFL years of experience on the Eagles coaching staff, it would be by far the lowest in the NFL. Now, again, that can come with innovation. That can come with new tendencies. That can come with good things. But it can also come with a lot of inexperience that ends up costing you games in terms of game management, player management, adjusting to your talent, all kinds of things. So we just had a lot of caution, whether it was cautious optimism or we just had a lot of, hey, we don't know. We said a lot of that during that section of the NFC East divisional preview. We're like, we just don't know. None of these guys have a lot of tape or history, any of them. There's not a gray beard among them. So we hope it works out, but it was right on the heels of the Nick Sirianni intro presser, which was a disaster. Doesn't sort of make or break a coach, but it certainly gives you a first impression of what is he doing? And then he came out like a month later and talked about potted plants, and people were like, what's going on? And the Eagles were still floundering at that point. The fact that they have turned it around, that they are in the playoffs, and that they really are, again, a team that some teams, not all teams, but some of the teams that are going into these playoffs don't want any part of. They have a very powerful offensive line. They've been finding a way to win. They are that team right now. It's a tremendous credit to Nick Sirianni as a first year and first time head coach, and to his entire staff, which does not have a ton of experience. The fact they've pulled together and put this team in a position to win more times than not in their first campaign, really, really impressive job.
And we're not even talking about like a top 5 talented team in the league here that just needed a fresh start. Like, there were significant holes on the roster. There still are some significant holes on the roster.
I was going to say, are you sure they're gone? I don't think they're gone.
But they're a playoff team, and they have 3 first-round picks to fix those holes. That's again, crazy.
That Howie Roseman part, right? You're like, oh, and so basically you did a 1-year rebuild. You were bad, just like New England. You were bad for 1 year. You're now back in the playoffs, and you've got a whole crap load of capital. If it was theoretically an open GM job, it is not. I'm not predicting that it's going to be. Howie's doing a great job. If it was a potential GM destination, you would take it in a heartbeat. You'd say, I've got a young quarterback who's established his ability to make it to the playoffs. I've got 3 first-round picks. I've got average salary cap flexibility. Like, I'm in a big market. Like, I'm good. Like, let's go. That would be a great destination. That franchise is in pretty good shape.
I think it's one of the best stories in the league.
One of the most underreported best stories in the league, I think.
Because I mean, how often do you see that kind of inexperience at all levels of the organization and having success? Like, don't talk to me about like, oh, their weak schedule. You play who's in front of you. There's other teams that have had weak schedules too, and they're horse shit. Like, the Denver Broncos have beat up on a bad teams too, a whole lot of bad teams, and they're not good.
Yeah, that's a whole nother podcast about perceptions and actual outcomes and results. But I really feel like the Eagles are the story that most NFL fans wanted the Dolphins to be, and are to a point, but it's like Dolphins in the AFC, right? Had a really rough, terrible first half. We talked about it again last week in the one that got deleted. Long losing streak, long winning streak. First in history, 7 losses, 7 wins. Dolphins fell off this last week and notched a loss, but like the Eagles, with a lot less fanfare, have had a very similar arc throughout the season. And you hear a lot of talk about Flores and his staff, again, because they've been in place longer maybe. But Nick Sirianni largely flying under the radar.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to get like any Coach of the Year consideration because, I mean, you see what Vrabel's done and LaFleur, and there's a lot of guys you could argue for.
A lot of deserving candidates this year.
He should at least get like a passing glance. I don't know. I think he's done a tremendous job. Yeah. 3 interesting number 2. Let's talk about sacks, baby. Just talk about you and me. I will never sing on this show again, by the way. That's the Lagavulin. Don't blame me.
I don't know. I think it was all right.
Well, you're also a little buzzed, too. You're no judge.
Yeah, and I'm not a great vocal talent, so.
TJ Watt. Let's talk about these sacks. 4 sacks on Monday night, bringing his total to, is it 20 and a half?
20 and a half.
I mean, he's nipping at the heels of the single-season record. Could very easily get it against Baltimore, knowing the tackles that Baltimore is running out there right now. Could very easily get it. People put an asterisk because 17-game season, whatever. Like, TJ missed a couple of games too, so he's not like, if we're looking at like games played, number of sacks in number of games played. I would not personally put an asterisk on that just because of how crazy productive he's been. Probably will win Defensive Player of the Year. I think that there's legitimate arguments for, Micah Parsons, AJ Terrell. I think it's a dark horse because he's been amazing this year and like one of the only things keeping the Falcons in games these days. But knowing how the voters vote, yeah, TJ Watt's probably going to be Defensive Player of the Year. Here's an interesting stat about TJ Watt specifically. So since 2021, this year, obviously he leads the league in sacks. Since 2020, last season, he leads all players in sacks. Since 2019, the season before that, he leads all players in sacks. And since 2018, the year before that, he leads all active players in sacks. You look at most productive pass rushers over a long period of time, he blows everybody out of the water. Like since 2019 specifically, he's got 51 sacks. Nobody else has more than 38 and a half. He is so far and above, again, in terms of production, over every other pass rusher in the league. Like nobody even comes close. And also, the first brother duo to get 20 sack seasons. Because remember, his older brother JJ also notched one himself. It's just an incredible achievement what he's done this year, despite being injured for a time, missing some games. It's hard to argue against anybody else but him for Defensive Player of the Year.
Occasionally in this lifetime, we get to be really glad about things we did a while ago.
What's that?
I am really glad that I brought his name up in our preview show when we were predicting year-end award winners. And I couldn't not. Like, I didn't have him on my initial list. We were all picking 2 or picking 3. I can't remember. And Defensive Player of the Year, this is the one. And if you go back to that podcast, we actually said it on the podcast. I was like, this was a struggle. There are a lot of good candidates. I can't not have Myles Garrett on there. And he's delivered this year as well. And I was like, and I ended up, and my final list didn't have TJ Watt on it. And I was like,
that seems wrong.
I was like, I just can't. I can't not say something about TJ Watt. So I said, in the podcast, I said, and TJ Watt in Pittsburgh, you got to consider him, right? He didn't make my rankings, but he's there. You can't put this list together and not have him on it. Oh man, am I glad I said that, because again, despite missing some games, his production speaks for itself. Since 2019, 51 sacks, no other player more than 38 and a half. Like, this isn't a one-year wonder. This isn't a flash in the pan. He's not going to regress to the mean. Like, this is his mean. He leads the league in sacks. That's his mean.
Every year.
And that's amazing. That is a hard thing to do. Sacks are fickle. They're hard to get. They're like interceptions. If you believe that Trayvon Diggs is going to lead the league in interceptions next year, you're probably wrong. The ball bounces funny. It's an oddly shaped ball, right? Things go up and down. The fact that despite that, in a extremely fickle category, he's been the leader, and the leader, says a lot about his talent, his work ethic, about the coaches in Pittsburgh and the situations they put him in. This is a guy that you can never count out of Defensive Player of the Year consideration if he's healthy. That's everything you want in a football player. Like, TJ Watt is a guy that pretty much every team in the league would be like, yep, we got a spot for him.
What's crazy, so, he's got 21 and a half sacks in 14 games, which is nuts. He's been so productive that he has completely overshadowed the other record-breaking season that's been happening across the league right now. Robert Quinn just broke Richard Dent's Chicago Bears single-season sack record. He's got 18 on the year now with a game to go. And that record stood for how many decades now? 3? 4?
You want to know the funny thing about that one, since we're talking about games and sacks per game?
Huh.
So Quinn got a chance to talk to him, and Dent reminded him he said it in 10 games.
He did 17 and a half in 10 games? Holy shit.
A little known fact, there were not 10 games in that season. He played 10 games in that season, and he got 17 and a half. So Richard Dent on his own plateau, but we need to talk about Quinn. Quinn last year was obviously injured. He didn't say so. He was this huge free agent signing of Ryan Pace. He comes out and basically lays a biscuit, does very little. Chicago fans get on him rightly really hard because he's making a ton of money. What we didn't know is he was hurt. He was injured. It was very clear. He comes out this year healthy, and he's back to Robert Quinn status, and he's wrecking everybody. Like you said, Khalil Mack's been out of the lineup, so you can't say, oh, he's been drawing all the attention. Akeem Hicks has missed a bunch of games. Quinn has been the leader and the guy for opposing offenses to focus on, and he still put up a single-season record in 16 games for the Bears, breaking Richard Dent's quite old record. Sean Desai, again, he's not going to get any coordinator of the year votes. He is a first-year DC in Chicago. The Bears are tied for second in sacks in the league.
With missing, as you mentioned, Khalil Mack and Akeem Hicks.
That's
for
the
a lot
part.
Of games.
Yeah, that's the part that makes that like, and most people would say that. They're like, oh, who's the third or fourth team in the league in sacks? People would, as poorly as the Bears have played this year, people would say, oh, the only reason the Bears have been in any of these games, because their secondary is terrible outside of Jalen Johnson, is because they've been able to pressure the quarterback very regularly. And guys like Travis Gibson, and we saw Angelo Blackson getting a sack this last week. Like, Sean Desai has patched together a pass rush with Robert Quinn in a record-setting season and a bunch of guys, because he's not had the other blue chippers on the line consistently. So when you look at a line like the Rams, like end-to-end, and they traded for Von Miller, like, yeah, you're expecting that line to get a lot of pressures and sacks, because anytime somebody gets doubled, the guy that's free is Von Miller. Like, yeah, that's the case. Hasn't been the case in Chicago. The fact they're second or third in sacks in the league in Desai's first year with limited weapons, real credit to him.
Also, his ability to scheme up those one-on-ones for Robert Quinn, like, he'll just park a linebacker over the center and say, go ahead, don't block me, I dare you. Because he gives him free reign. He's like, look, if they... Like, you bail out, but if they're just all sliding away, just go. Like, he'll give him the green light. Like, Roquan, I mean, he lets Roquan do whatever he wants because he's Roquan, but, like, they absolutely have that green light where if there's an alley there, run through it, because I bet you can get to the quarterback before he gets rid of the ball.
Yeah.
And, it works. It works.
And his ghost is as good as almost anybody's in the league right now, and he uses it. He's used it for really high quality sacks. Our buddy Brandon Thorne, who we've had on the show, who's one of the foremost experts in my mind on offensive line play, rates quality of sacks, not just because they're cleanup sacks. They're sacks where the quarterback runs out of a good pocket and runs into you. There's a different quality to sacks. Like, he says of Robert Quinn, like, the majority of those sacks are what I classify as high quality sacks, that he beat somebody and earned them. Like, you watch his ghost, he used it in last week's game.
It's gorgeous.
Good luck touching
It's
him.
absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
That's what I love about it. The whole situation, because Desai knows what he has out there with Quinn, where it's like, if I could just give him that one-on-one, if I could just force them to not double him, just even if I don't actually bring more than 4, if I could just make it look like I'm not going to bring more than 4, just give him that one-on-one so that he can win in 2.5 seconds, and he's going to win, and he wins every single week. Phenomenal job by him. I think he's really, again, I don't know what's going to happen with Nagy. He's probably gone. I don't know what's going to happen with Pace. Whoever comes in next at head coach, I really hope they do the same thing they did with Vic when Vic was DC and he was a holdover. I hope they hold over Sean Desai, because I don't think they're going to get another young DC like him.
You know what's crazy about Sean Desai?
What's that?
That would be his 4th head coaching regime as a Bears coach. He has survived through 3 coaching regimes because he is that good.
So was he Trestman? Was he with Trestman?
Came in last year, Trestman made it through Fox, and now he's with Nagy.
Really? I didn't realize he went all the way back to Trestman.
Yep.
Damn.
He's made it through 3 head coaching regimes. That would be his 4th. That, I think, would be unheard of. Somebody that's held over 4 times with a team. That, again, a team that's
because
changed,
they're that good.
right, a team that's changed coaches 4 times. Like, normally a coach will say, nah, I need all my own people. So the fact that he survived once through a regime change is amazing. The fact that he was a junior staffer at the time. The fact that he survived twice is ridiculous. You know,
You
so
survived
he's
3,
in his
though.
3rd. If he survives 3 times, and they would be silly not to consider him, because his results as a first-year DC have been very good given what he's had to work with, especially in the secondary. It's not been pretty.
Let's get to 3 interesting number 3, and this is, again, more of a... historical appreciation. I'm choosing to not think about what Big Ben is right now. I'm choosing to remember what Big Ben was for many, many, many years before the last few, when clearly his arm gave out, I think is a nice way to put it. It's unbelievable to me, and I don't even know where you got this stat.
It came up in the broadcast. Okay, that's where it was. They said it in the broadcast, and I was like, they must have misspoken. That's not possible.
Listen to this stat if you're watching or listening in the podcast form, because it's mind-blowing. In 18 years, Ben Roethlisberger has only played in two games where the Steelers were out of playoff contention. That means that he has had them in the hunt until week 17 or this year, week 18, every single year except two. That is remarkable. Other than probably Tom Brady or Peyton Manning, I can't think of anybody else who's done that.
Yeah, and only for a game, right? I would actually venture that Peyton's mark is probably higher because they were out pretty early his rookie year.
Oh, that's a good point. I didn't even think about that.
This is such an easy stat to blow, right? If you're Peyton Manning and you have a rookie year that is expected of rookies and your team gets eliminated with 3 weeks to go, you have no chance at this, no matter how good your Hall of Fame career is, right? The fact that you played 18 years, which is 6 times the league average, by the way. League average career is 3-point-something years. You're talking about roughly 3 times the league average in terms of length of career. Obviously played at a Hall of Fame level. Obviously will end up going to Canton, which is a perfect full circle because he's an Ohio kid, right? Went to high school in Ohio, went to college in Ohio, and he'll go back to Ohio as a Hall of Famer. Like, perfect circle, but literally 18 years in a rugged division, a division that traditionally beats the living hell out of itself. And he's played in 2 total games, not 2 seasons where he was out of contention and he had, that 1 year where they were 6 games out and, by the time a month was, we were within 4 games, it was like, nah, they're done, right? No, this is what being above 500 every season will get you, and that's the next stat. But it came up during the broadcast and I was like, wow, that's it. It's impossible.
It puts it into perspective.
Yeah, it's impossible. It puts it into perspective.
What he and Mike Tomlin have done, because Tomlin also, keep in mind, this past week became the first coach in NFL history to start his career with 15 straight years of no losing seasons. Even Belichick didn't do that. Shula didn't do that. Paul Brown didn't do that. Like, you go down the list. Nobody's done that is, A, coached for that long, but B, never been outright bad. They've been disappointing some years, absolutely, especially look at the last few years, but they've never been outright bad. And I think, considering some of the recent events with what has happened with some of the players that were there under his tenure, I mean, God, he had Ben and Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell and all these guys under one roof for how long? And he kept that shit under control. And they didn't lose. Like, that to me is a testament to Mike Tomlin's greatness. He's one of the best coaches of his generation because he was literally sitting in the saddle on top of a fucking powder keg. And they were great. They were never bad. It's unbelievable. The Steelers' legacy with Ben and Coach Tomlin. I honestly, other than Belichick and Brady themselves, I can't think of another duo. I mean, this has never been done before. And you think about all the duos that have come before. That's never been done.
Yeah, and you look at Heinz Field last night, and it was an atmosphere that was, he knew. There was just a ton of appreciation, as you would expect, in that stadium from that fan base. Incredibly loyal fans in Pittsburgh. They travel like almost no other fans in the NFL. To have that extended run of greatness on the field in that city with that combination, it's special. I watched all of it. I watched it right to the end. Was it a great game? No, it was a competitive game. I mean, they had a chance, like Cleveland had a chance at the end. But they popped up Cleveland's record at Heinz Field. They're like 3-24 or something in their last 27 games there, and that includes the playoff win from last year. Like, they're like 3-24, a division rival, right? Now, look, the Browns haven't been great for a long time, but they've been pretty good for a couple of years at least. 3-24. Like, that combination of Ben and Tomlin just stomped that shit. They had no shot when they came to their house. And
for a long time, Ben was the winningest quarterback at First Energy Stadium.
Yes.
In Cleveland.
Yes, that's true too. It was a special atmosphere. I watched the whole thing because of that, because you're going to remember it. And a lot of people were saying, oh, you know, Ben he's played a very long time, 18 years. A lot of people were saying, oh, this is the last quarterback going out from the first class I remember getting drafted when I was in, middle school or high school, like that. You think about it, if you were, 7 years old when Ben Roethlisberger was drafted, right? You're in the middle of your life. You're probably married, doing whatever. Like, you've never known.
You're 35, 2 kids and a mortgage and a white picket fence.
And you've never known a Steelers quarterback besides Ben Roethlisberger. That's exceptional. Like, that's not a thing you see happen a lot in the NFL. So that's why I watched the entire game.
Let's get to the bootleg shot of the week. And we're actually making history today. This is the second time we've done a shot for this week's winner, because we did it last week and then I deleted the episode.
I forgot about that.
We're doing it again.
The bootleg double shot episode.
So I'm using the same tequila. Got my Altos here.
I joined you, but I didn't do Altos. I did Milagro. So I've got Milagro Silver.
Oh, there you go.
And I figured tequila for tequila. It's, shake off those winter blues, get rid of a little bit of the icicles outside, and pretend that you're on a beach somewhere drinking tequila.
Well, go to New Orleans. It's 80 and 85% humidity.
I'll keep that in mind.
So this week's and last week's winner was Pat Fryermuth ragdolling. Or sorry, not Pat Fryermuth. Pat Fryermuth getting ragdolled by Jeffrey Simmons. It was a very, very lively debate in the comments about who would win that one. And I think people just seeing a 260-pound man getting comically thrown around, like he's a weeble wobble or something like that, people couldn't resist. So they voted Jeffrey Simmons, the monster of Tennessee. Salud. This, I think, goes down even better than Cazadores.
Milagro Silver, and this was chilled. Some of the smoothest tequila ever. Yeah, if you haven't or you don't, follow Brian Baldinger. He did a thing on Tennessee's defensive line, called him the best in the league. Obviously, Jeffrey Simmons is part of that.
Really?
Yeah. Yesterday or today. Check out Baldy's account. Really interesting breakdown of some of the fun stuff that Tennessee is doing in combination with their linebackers, but really setting up, just like you said with Sean Desai, using linebackers to set up two-way goes for their defensive linemen. So cool piece if you're interested. People always ask us, like, hey, what sources do you look at? And where do you get extra knowledge about X, Y, or Z? And Baldy's great. Baldy's breakdowns every week are a lot of fun and well done.
This week's nominees, we have an eclectic bunch. Number 1, Avery Williams on punt coverage. Putting a hat on the ball, knocking it loose from, I think it was Isaiah McKenzie?
Not sure who the returner was, but I love getting special teamers into the mix because this is a big play. Big play in a game. Technically very sound. Put his hat right on the ball. This was a game changer and a big hit as well. So,
hell of a hit. Nominee number 2, Adrian Amos, who's really had a fantastic run in Green Bay ever since he got there. I think this was on one cross, if I remember correctly. They showed too high, and then Amos kind of came down late. This is a coverage that we've seen a lot of quarterbacks throw picks on, and Conklin was running an option route, and Kirk thought he was shallow enough that, it won't be a pick. He'll just have to hold on to the ball. And he did not hold on to the ball when Amos lit his ass up. Interestingly enough, the ball didn't go to the ground. It went straight up in the air, where Garrett Bradbury, of all people, caught it and took off running for kind of an immaculate reception 2.0. An amazing play for a lot of different reasons, but I wanted to specifically highlight that hit from Amos. Form tackle, perfect hit, put Conklin right on his ass, and got a PBU out of it. Or does that count as a PBU?
I'm not sure. But did you see the leg drive on Bradbury? He had form 3-point control on the ball. This is a guy that probably played running back in like Pee Wee football.
I think it was tight end, if I remember correctly. He had a lot of catches at tight end.
Like leg drive, lean the whole bit. I was like, you go, big guy. That's yeah. Offensive linemen everywhere cheer when that happens. I guarantee it. I'm on a writing staff with at least 3 former offensive linemen, and yeah, that is the highlight. They don't care who it comes from, who gets what, touchdown, positive yards, catch completed. They don't care. Like, they're like, that's my play. Yeah, it is a fraternity offensive line.
I just looked it up. He was a tight end and defensive end in high school, got recruited to NC State as a tight end, and they converted him to offensive line, as so many teams do these days. They take talented tight ends that can move, and they say, hey, here's some biscuits. Put your hand in the dirt. Let's go.
You've got good feet. Bulk up, kid.
Yep. And it worked. It worked. He got picked in the first round because of it. Yeah. Nominee number 3, Javon Holland, a Shot of the Week alumni multiple times this year, delivering the hammer. And he's one of those guys where not only does he have range and ball skills, but he's kind of like Budda Baker, where if he's 15 yards deep, he can still come from depth and play the run in a hurry. And the Titans found that out pretty quick here. Got the stop just short of the sticks, set up a punt, one of the only punts Tennessee had that day. They still lost by a lot, but hell of a play from Javon Holland to come from depth and fill the run and do so as violently as only he can.
Yeah. Alumnus, by the way, since we're doing
Is
Latin.
It not alumni? Oh, alumni is plural.
Alumni is plural. Alumnus is singular male.
Nerd.
Oh, yeah. Hardcore. Guilty as charged. Anyways, Holland quickly becoming, we were a fan of his, pre-draft, and he has continued that on with his play in Miami this year. A guy that is underrated, definitely, if you were doing a redraft, which is always an interesting exercise, would not slip to the second round. This is a versatile playmaking safety with talent and pass coverage and the ability like this to cover range and lay a lick. Look, the play had already gone lateral, and he just kept it moving that way. It wouldn't have been, it's only about a yard and a half from the sticks, from the marker, made sure the ball carrier wasn't going to get there. Javon Holland, a guy to keep an eye on, rising star defensively in the league.
And then options number 4 and 5, because EJ refused to have 4 options this week, had to have both of these. It was a stiff arm of Palooza over on Monday night between the Steelers and the Browns. Najee Harris got his customary weekly stiff arm, and Nick Chubb might have had the stiff arm of the year, both in this game. We couldn't leave one out, so we just threw them both in at option 4 and 5. You can choose whichever one you like best. They're both incredible stiff arms. I know you're partial to the Chubb one. I want to reward Najee for consistency because he seems to do this every single week.
Yeah, I'm not going to short him. I did see the Najee play first. I got to the game a little bit late, so I didn't see the Chubb stiff arm live, but it got sent to me by, thank you very much, at least 3 bootleg viewers in rapid succession. Like, hey, did you see this one when I put out the hey, it's Monday call? And the view that we have, the view that's linked on the YouTube version of this, is the slow motion version, and it's oddly hypnotic. It is a perfect disaster for the Pittsburgh DB. Like, there are so many things that could have gone one iota different, and it wouldn't have been that bad, but they all failed, and this became the stiff arm of doom. Like, watch his upper body bounce off the turf. It looks like Chubb's dribbling a basketball, but it happens to be a Steelers defensive back. It is everything went perfectly wrong for that guy, and he became a completely ballistic piece of this equation. Like, he just got bounced, and it's really ugly, but Chubb put a lot of effort into it. Had to be included. Yeah, I think you know who I'd vote for at this point, so no poker face.
So if you want to vote for these, and even if you're listening to the audio-only version, we have a pinned comment in the YouTube version of this show. You can cast your vote there, and next week, we'll take yet another shot to the winner.
Do you know you got nominated this week?
I got nominated?
Yep.
By who?
This was the underrated Twitter comment of the week, which I, out of deference to you, did not respond to, but I put out the call for bootleg shot of the week nominees. And somebody said, Brett, for this week's podcast, click on the link below, ...
Oh, no.
And I was like,
I didn't mean to.
I know.
I thought it was saved.
And people thought I was taking shots at you, and I just want to commend your consistency. We're fast approaching 100 episodes on Bootleg. I think this is like the 97th upload or something. And we've never done that before. So we're like, 1 for 97 on misses. It's a pretty good rate in just about any industry. Certainly if you're talking about draft or winning football games, we're high above that average. So I appreciate and applaud your consistency. And yeah, it was a bit like losing something. Again, it happened we should just mention it happened on the same day that John Madden passed and Jeff Dickerson passed. Like, it was a rough day, and you texted me like early the next morning, 12:30, 12:45. I think I deleted it, and by that point I was all out of F's. I couldn't give anything else, and I was like, oh. And it was only later as I went to like, oh, I should reference that on Twitter, like, hey, we talked about Fangio, hey, we talked about the baby Bengals, hey, and I was like, oh, it doesn't exist, it's gone. It wasn't until later that I got real mournful, because there were just bigger things on the day that it happened. But in general, I'm really glad with the consistency that we have, and it's pretty darn good.
We are the Justin Tucker of mediocre football podcasts.
There you go. I absolutely take that mantle proudly.
Let's get to the Week 18 watch list, the final regular season week of the year. All of these games have some sort of major playoff implication. Chargers, Raiders speaks for itself, win and in. That's why the league flexed it to Sunday Night Football, why it's the last game of the year, because it is theoretically win and in. Unless, number 2 on this list, Jacksonville beats Indy. Again, the Colts have not won in Jacksonville since 2014. One of the weirder stats I've come across this week. And so I'm not saying that they will win or lose, but it's possible they lose. And if they do, then the Chargers-Raiders game potentially gets a lot more interesting because they can tie and both make it in. And the NFC side, San Francisco is in a win and in scenario, and the Rams are motivated to, even though they're already clinched, they're motivated to beat San Francisco, because if San Francisco loses, to my recollection, they also need the Saints to lose in order to guarantee their playoff spot. But I know when in their win and in scenario, they win, or they're in outright if they win. And the Rams don't want the Niners to be in, because the Niners, historically, are pretty good against the Rams. Like, regardless of how good or bad either of these teams are, they both give each other a lot of trouble. So it's in the Rams' best interest to just nip that in the bud and eliminate them now. But let's just say the Niners do lose. The Saints and Falcons game is also super interesting because the Saints can make the playoffs if they win and the 49ers lose. So there's a lot going on this weekend and a lot of games to pay attention to.
Yeah, the Saints, I didn't mention them earlier. I should have. In those teams like the Raiders, the Eagles are already in. The Dolphins we talked about, they're not probably going to make it, but like these teams that nobody thought had a chance, the Steelers, right? The Steelers and the Saints are kind of in the same boat of they're not in control of their own destiny, but you also thought they had no shot at the playoffs, right? The Saints have had a terrible run at quarterback this year, but Sean Payton has put together enough wins that it's even possible in the last week of the season. That's an amazing achievement. Now we'll see if it happens. There's a couple things that need to happen for the Saints to get in. And do I think the Saints are really going anywhere if they get in the NFC playoffs? Nah, not probably. But that kind of doesn't matter. It's a different bar for them this year. So 49ers Rams is fascinating because it's a division rivalry as well, which again, the NFL does a great job of putting those in the last week of the season. And typically that would be for divisional seeding. Look, Rams are already in, but yeah, they would prefer to end Kyle Shanahan right now. They don't want that.
They have 5 straight losses to the Niners, so they do not want them in the playoffs.
They do not want that hanging around as a specter. They would much rather have the Saints, in terms of a matchup. So it's a fascinating game on multiple levels, but the Rams have stumbled a little bit. Matt Stafford's turned into a bit of a, turnover slot machine in the last couple of weeks. So it'll be interesting to see if they can come back, if Jimmy's, thumb's healed enough. I don't think he is. Trey Lance played pretty well in the second half last week. There's just a lot of storylines. So all these games are interesting from that perspective of, yeah, if this happens, could be direct winning in or has an influence on another race. Fascinating that there's that many storylines left in what is the longest season in NFL history, that we still have drama going into the very last week.
Yeah, something tells me the league wanted it that way.
Oh, for sure.
They make a lot more money when it's this dramatic.
Yes, they do.
Why don't we wrap this up and we'll get out of here real quick. We're like 2 hours into this thing, so sure we don't have very many people hanging on at this point, but for those of you that are still here, thank you very much. What do you got coming up this week on Bears Over Beers, your last Bears Over Beers of the regular season?
Yeah, it is. It's the last Bears Over Beers of the regular season. We, too, are Olympic to the finish, a little bit like the Vikings. We resorted to a pizza topping draft last week because it was the Giants game, and we didn't really want to talk about the Giants all that much. We talked about the Giants a little bit and their situation with the GM.
How did you not do a bagel topping draft?
We could have done bagel, but pizza, Chicago versus New York is a little more apples to apples.
Okay.
Anyways, you can check that out. It is, we're tired. A lot of Bears fans, like you said, have already checked out, kind of like this podcast at 2 hours in. You lose some folks when the team is not competitive, but we're going to finish strong and do that. What do you got coming up for Film Room?
This week I got nothing.
Oh.
Next week, I'm still waiting for people to vote on the topic. So I think it's probably going to come down to, what happens this week with all the craziness heading into the playoffs. I'm hoping that I'll probably get to do something on Jonathan Taylor this January because I've been wanting to do Jonathan Taylor for a while, but other stuff just keeps coming up. And I've always loved Jonathan Taylor. You can go back to his time in college. He reminds me of like Arian Foster, but with, jetpacks strapped to his back. Yeah, one of my favorite running backs in the league. So hopefully I'll get to do him at some point before the season is over. Maybe the Colts go on a mystical run and I'll have more time to do that. But the sooner the better, because I'm not entirely sure how far they're going to go.
For sure. And we get to announce the birth of something new, which is pretty damn cool. So we're going to launch another channel. Thump, thump, thump. So we're going to make the Bootleg Football Clips channel because this is a long-form channel and the algorithm thinks everybody loves 2-hour content on this channel. So if we made a bunch of 5 or 10-minute clips, the algorithm would get really confused. So to avoid that, we're going to make a brand new channel. A lot of you have reached out. Some folks even reached out this last week and said, hey, I have a great idea for you and Brett. You should take small clips, little vignettes out of the podcast, clip them out, and just send them out as like 2-3 minute, highlights. And we were like, yeah, we've been wanting to do that for a long time. So we're finally going to do it. We made the channel. There'll probably be a few clips from this podcast that end up over there. We'll certainly link it in the description. And we'll promote it on Twitter as well. But we're going to have the Shorts channel. A lot of content's going to go there leading up to draft season. We should say our credentials to both the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Bowl coming up. So the big senior all-star games, we'll be getting content from there on that. Anything that's in a shorter format where we're doing a sort of anywhere from 2 to sort of 10-minute little burst, we'll go on the Clips channel. So we can keep the small content over there. We'll keep all the bootleg football content you love here on the main channel, but we'll have both, and that'll be going live as soon as this week, so look for that.
Yeah, and also now that there's no Thursday Night Football, and I'm not pressured for the almighty algorithm to get these up, like as soon as I possibly can on Wednesday, I can add in like more film clips and diagrams, and the clips will look all nice and pretty and well produced and that kind of stuff. So I'm excited to see where that goes. I wouldn't be surprised if it goes the way of a lot of other podcasts who kind of separate out and do different channels, where the clips channels always end up doing better than the actual main show. I would not be shocked if that's where we get to, because people like consuming their football content in like 10 to 12 minute bites sometimes instead of a 2-hour bite. But for all you truck drivers out there that listen to the show, because I know there's at least 8 of you.
Yeah, for sure.
Don't worry, the 2-hour podcast will continue now and forever.
Until morale improves.
So with that being said, thank you to everybody for listening. Thank you to Consti, Murat, Andrew, everybody that is our executive producers over in the Bootleg Hall of Fame. Couldn't do this without you guys. Remember to show up on Saturday at noon Pacific.
We will send you details.
Top 2,
yep.
We will send you details so that you can show up and ask whatever you want, hang out with us. It'll be I guess you could consider it like a playoff pregame show.
Sure, why not?
Whatever you want to label it.
We'll call it a playoff pre-funk.
Yeah, so that'll be this Saturday, and hopefully we see you guys soon. So, till then, later.
Take care.